With a major selection of the looks your kiddos love starting at just $4 in the Walmart app, a new school year means a stylish new them. Who knew? Find skater skirts and Crocs that say, I'm casual but cool. Sparkly sneakers that say, it's my classroom, you're just learning in it. And preppy polos that say, I'm the teacher's pet, even if they're mommy's menace at home. Find their favorite styles starting at just $4 in the app. The Walmart you thought you knew is now new.
Brooks Running reminds us that we're all powered by something. Whether it's the me-time energy of a run after a day at the office, the electrifying energy of your first marathon, or the infectious energy of a group run with your friends. No matter what energy powers you, Brooks has gear specifically designed to unleash it. So lace up and let it out. Let's run there. Visit brooksrunning.com today to learn more.
Gatorade is the #1 proven electrolyte blend designed to hydrate better than water. So you can lose more sweat and raise your game. Gatorade, is it in you?
Got some good news for your ears. More of that good stuff is coming up. And even better news for your hair. The best hair care is at Sephora. They've got all kinds of products for every kind of hair. From brands like Micah, Kerastase, Day, and K18. You knew where to get great audio. Now, you know where to get great hair care, too. Sephora. Good news for great hair. Shop hair care now at Sephora.com.
This episode is sponsored by Friskies, who would like to tell your cats hi. Now, if that didn't get your cat's attention, there's one thing that always does the trick. Just pour some Friskies crunchy food in the bowl and you'll hear those paws come running. Works every time. With so many Friskies choices, you can always bring your cats running from their secret napping spots. There's always more to explore. See for yourself at friskies.com or visit your local store.
Welcome back to another episode of Eagles Edge. And this is just finishing up our mailbag episode from last time. We got so many good questions and we wanted to give them all their chance to get answered, but we weren't able to do that last time. And if you're joining live, feel free to send in questions as well. Generally, it's best to do that on YouTube. You can find that over at Eagles Pin Poll. So as people are joining, I'm just going to pick up where we left off last episode. As I get into some of these questions, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the Parsons trade. It did surprise me. I thought they would wait till the day of the game and then give him the biggest contract ever. 5 years, $215 million. But I guess Jerry just wanted to shake things up. And I think, some Eagles fans are celebrating because he's out of the division, but he just made a team that's more of a contender than the Cowboys better. So I think it is impactful in that sense. Obviously, the Eagles play them later this year. I don't think he's necessarily gave the Eagles too many issues in the past. Just, the tackles really know how to neutralize them, and they'll do some things in the game plan to kind of, run at him or make him shoot upfield and use trap plays and stuff like this. But yeah, I thought the Packers were underrated before this move. Probably, actually in one of my articles, I thought the Packers were one great edge rusher away from being considered one of the league's better units. And obviously they have some questions on the outside as well. But it makes it a lot easier when you don't have to deal with covering guys for 5 seconds. So last thing I'll say on this, unless we get more questions later, it looks like we got a comment coming in here. One of the things I talked about, it's a research project I'm currently working on, which is looking at the relative impact of players when they rush the passer who tend to circumnavigate the offensive tackle, whether that's inside or outside. And I'm just labeling that as a pocket penetrator versus pocket condensers. Guys who tend to take a linear path towards the quarterback. And if they can win straight through the guy, great. But otherwise, they're pushing the offensive lineman back into the quarterback's lap. preventing them from scrambling, giving them a tough time stepping into throws, often pushing them into other teammates, Grafs, who end up getting the sack. And my early indications are that if you can get a true pocket condenser, which there's not many of them out there, that's probably the most potent type of pass rush style there possibly is. So yes, you're not going to get the counting stats that someone who's a pocket penetrator will, but the on-field impact will be there. It's just not necessarily measurable by our traditional ways of using edge rusher statistics. That's where you need tracking data. And for people who are unfamiliar, essentially there's chips in the player's pads and the football, and I believe it's for every 1 second that passes, there's 10 frames of information. So that if I change direction in my body, if I accelerate, how fast I'm going, all of these things are captured at that frame rate. And that's how you can figure out stuff that doesn't have traditional way of being captured. Even in charting statistics, you actually are able to see how much, does this actually disrupt what the offense is doing on a macro scale. Got a bunch of comments coming in. Hey, what's up, Krabby? We will be seeing him twice. I guess they mean meeting the Packers in the playoffs. Micah creates explosive plays and causes havoc for teams that force the pass game the way we did in 23. There's no doubt this guy is one of the best, if not the best in the game. But he does have some drawbacks in the run game. Sometimes he will just get displaced vertically. Sometimes he will get such an explosive get off, but it's vertical and he just gets walled off or trapped, and you can exploit him in the run game. And it's not often that he's causing quarterbacks to go into other players' arms, except where he just wins quicker on the edge and causes them to scramble. But generally those are throwaways, which are manageable because they're equal to incompletions. But pocket condensers, sometimes the quarterback has nowhere to go. So it's either I'm going to risk an interception, I'm going to intentionally ground it, or I'm just going to get sacked. So that's has some hidden value there. Got a bunch of comments here. Bit behind, but the Eagles tackles pretty much know how to handle every premier pass rusher. Yeah, I mean, you could argue this pair of tackles is one of the best of all time for tackle pairings. That's an obvious luxury. And it's certainly true that there are certain types of physical builds where they just have almost an impossible time blocking Parsons. If you're kind of like a slow-footed, tall, and he's able to just kind of get that first knockback on you with his hands and then dip around the corner, and then you're just trying to do this, and he has the core strength to be able to not get driven into the ground as he's cornering, that's going to be a long day. We saw with Bryce Huff, it was that similar style of attack, but he didn't have that lower body strength. When he went to corner, he just got literally pancaked into face flat into the turf. So he definitely can wreck a game. And if the Eagles didn't have a pair of tackles of this level, I think we would be a lot more like stressing about every edge rusher that comes to play, because there are a lot of teams in the NFL that think, what are we going to do? We got TJ Watt coming up. We got Bosa, Crosby. Will Anderson, this is another underrated player. He's a pocket condenser style. I mean, if you told me that guy is the best edge rusher, most impactful edge rusher in the NFL next year, I would not be surprised at all. Trayvon Walker, he's obviously been a name that's been floated around in Eagle circles. And here's the thing. He's cost controlled. For at least for the next 2 years, he comes cheap. Like his impact exceeds what you'd be paying him in cap by a long shot. And one of his problems is he's like Shamar Stewart. You line him up as a 5 technique, you don't give him a lot of room to work. He's known for not having a deep pass rush bag. And he's not like he's, elite lateral agility. Like, it's not like his strength is elite strength. It's really good strength. It's good lateral agility, great explosiveness. But when you put that out at a wide 9, which in some of these Eagles fronts, like cheat front, rush front, these are like nickel type fronts used in pass rush situations when you have four down. I love him in that role because I'm saying all you got to do is get firing off the line in a straight path with the tackle straight through his center and just bulldoze that guy. And like, I don't care if you ever get a single sack. That's highly valuable. So yeah, let's say the Jags come out of the gates and they're 0-5. I'm absolutely seeing like, could we give up something like 60 cents on a dollar to get Walker for 2 years, even with no intention to sign him long term? Like if he turns around and he goes, yeah, I'm looking for 4 years, 120 million. That's fine. Let him walk. One of your charts got used by Perna on That's Good Sports today. So he actually did just follow me recently. So that's really cool to hear. I guess he saw one of my stats I put up. Ryan, if you want to post like which of the charts it was, that would be really cool to see. I appreciate that. All right. J13 says 8 a.m. in Tokyo. 1 week to go, ladies. Let's go, Eagles. So you're in Tokyo? So we got fans all around the world. Eagles better kick Cowboys' butts. Today is my cousin's birthday. A Jags fan's in the house. I'm a Jags fan. You're not getting Walker. Yeah, I mean, if it would have happened, it probably would have happened already. But like I said, if they came out of the gates and they're not looking good and they've already decided, okay, he's not in our long-term plans. Well, when there's this amount of time, when you can get 10 games in a season, a playoff run, and a subsequent season, now a team's willing to pony up value. But if you're like, oh yeah, like he actually didn't have that good a year with the Jags, and now there's only 1 year left, the compensation's not going to be there. So I'm sure that's what this young GM is doing over there, saying, is he going to be someone we're going to sign long term? And edge rushers don't grow on trees. And their defense already stinks. So they're not going to want to like deal him unless they know they got someone behind who's ready to step in. 21-22 Georgia defense was just unreal. Walker, the Eagle. Staying in the state of Georgia, there's another edge rusher on their rookie contract who's played at Georgia Tech by the name of Keon White. He actually lost the job to Caleb Von Chason in preseason. This is an older player, so this doesn't mean that they're ready to go ahead and trade White. But beat writers for New England have said his name has been tossed around in trades. Like this possibility that this guy could be moved. He predated Vrabel. So it's very possible that they might not want to keep Keon White. And I was watching this guy's film from the inside. He's unbelievable. One of the most underrated edge rushers. But it's because he's best from the interior. He's another guy, when you put him out wide, he's 6'5", 290 or something like this. And he's got some nice strength to him. He also could be a pretty good rusher from outside. But it seems like the Patriots, they knew he was much better inside, so they used him there a ton, and he did great. They didn't like him outside, but he also didn't play that wide when he played outside. And the few snaps he did, he actually looked good. So this is a player I'm like, obviously everyone knows I've been high on Ojomo for a while. You could see, I could see Ojomo going for like 6 sacks, 40 pressures. No problem. 5-man rush when he was doing power rankings talking about Washington. And for people who are unfamiliar, I did a project where I basically charted time to pressure by number of pass rushers on a given play. So anywhere from 0 to 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 7 plus. These are the number of guys coming at the quarterback. Isolated to neutral down in distances in between the 25s. And I looked at EPA per play. I looked at time to pressure. And you could see that between 4 and 5, the time to pressure barely changed at all. The EPA per play got worse by a good amount. And there was a lot of play. There was a long tail, which means there's a lot of times when you rush 5, you don't get home for a really long time. The second you go to 6 pass rushers, that tail goes away completely. You're going to get there. It's just a question of when. You're not going to ever take, let's call it 6 seconds to pressure the quarterback when you rush 6, like unless they're max protecting. Even then, you think about it, it's like 6 one-on-ones. Like you're going to cause a pressure. When sometimes 5-man rushes get completely thwarted, it might as well be a 3-man, the way it's affecting the quarterback, like looking at the pocket integrity. If you do isolate it to plays where it's only above a 50% pass rate, so situations where you go back and you look retroactively to see which situations were producing a pass rate over 50% historically, you only look at those plays, and the EPA per play became very close to each other. And the time to pressure stuff was still fairly similar. And that's basically cherry picking plays where you know they're going to pass. The second part of this is the 5-man rush. That doesn't necessarily seem to contribute a ton towards improving your run defense. Sometimes these 5-man surfaces have a thin second level because they're walking someone down, but it's not like they're adding a man to the box. They're just changing their alignment. And if you get out leveraged in some of those like 5-1 type fronts, that could be a big play. And it happened. So the takeaway was kind of like, on any given down, like it's kind of better to just rush 4. You can show like you're going to rush 7, like walk everyone up, rush 4. That has efficacy. Don't show it at all. Look like you're going to rush 3 and then bring someone off ball. Have a straight up 4-man rush. Bring a linebacker and drop an edge like the Eagles did with their whip pressure in the preseason with Campbell. All those are valid. Or just bring 6. You're going to walk double mug? Bring them. Don't give the offensive line too much credit. Make them block that. If you always, like the Eagles in 23, put double mug and then they just shoot out of it 98% of the time. Like if you don't bring the guys, then they're not going to respect it. One of the things Fangio was masterful last year was understanding quickly after the first drive, like what is the offensive line's approach to blocking Jalen Carter? And we're going to change our alignments and our shifts and our twists based off what their plan of attack is. Maybe they're going to play jet protection and they're going to have the center. They're going to play 3 to Carter's side, 2 to the opposite side, and get the center and guard double teaming Jalen Carter. This would be like a basic approach. Or you have like games, I think Falcons, even to some extent Chiefs, where they're like, we like our guard. We're going to let him go mano and mano. And yeah, we'll help him sometimes, but we're happy to play big on big protection, scat protection, and that it didn't work because the entire talk about a pocket getting condensed. It's not like guys were just winning one-offs and then running in and attacking Mahomes. It was closing in on him. He had nowhere to go and then just sacked himself, essentially. So, easier said than done, but you clearly have a thing for power rushers. And I'll say it's not true. I've always liked the hyper-athletic edge rusher. That's been the archetype that I've found personally enjoyable. Sometimes I thought these bruising edge rushers who kind of just charge into people. It felt like it had no like finesse to it. It didn't require like much football IQ. But ultimately, I care what is the most impactful. And if you can have a guy who can just bludgeon the pocket, force the quarterback into your teammates' hands, don't let him scramble, make him throw interceptions. Even when you don't get there, you have an opportunity to jump up and bat the ball down or cause an errant throw because the guy's getting his anchor blown up and the quarterback's footing is dislodged. Cold Day says, can you talk about fun things you noticed with your metric that the rest of us may not know? And I don't know which metric you're referring to. My guess would be Oasis, which is an upgraded version of EPA with opponent strength, situational leverage, and consistency factors added in. I think one thing is it's supposed to be a descriptive statistic. It's merely trying to capture what happened in the games and quantify that in a more accurate and representative manner. Like that's the goal with that kind of stat. So it's hard to make grand sweeping conclusions, especially because there's year-to-year variance. One of the things that makes predicting who's going to win so difficult is the extreme parity with the amount of coaching and personnel changes, injuries, even just schedule strength, turnover luck. There's so many elements that are impacting who ultimately wins. So I always find it funny when people try to like say, this is the reason this team won. It makes no sense at all. Speaking of contracts, how much are we going to have to pay Jalen Carter now that Parsons helped reset the market? And I would invite everyone to look at Twitter, but I think I may be able to bring it up myself here. But so I posted a Jalen Carter contract projection, and it's supposed to mimic like the style of contract that Howie Roseman would do. So I'm going to put it up here on the screen. Okay. So hopefully you guys can see this, but this is the contract projection. And my APY was $36 million. This is the highest APY, which means average per year, of any defensive tackle ever. But one of the things that's overlooked for whatever reason is with the salary cap inflation, you can't think of APY in any kind of, with any intuition, unless you're like studying this stuff every day, because 36 million might sound insane to someone from 2023 if you're comparing those contracts. But you have to be comparing it based off the cap. So really, I'm always thinking about what is the percentage of the cap at the time of signing? And this is subject to change. Like if Carter goes out and is first team all pro and has crazy counting stats, this number could go up. But this number is a fraction shy of the average percentage of cap as Chris Jones. It makes sense. Chris Jones signed his contract at like, we're talking what, 5 years older? You're talking about 29 years old versus like, 24, 25 years old. It's a big difference in age. So obviously, like, Chris Jones is a better player, but significantly older. I think it makes sense that he would be in that range. The Eagles could easily afford this. Look at the cap hits. Essentially what this is what they call concurrently running option bonuses, some colloquially referred to as rolling option bonuses, where if you look down here, this is the total amount that they would receive in each year, but it's prorated over 5 seasons. So even though let's say he signed this contract after the last regular season game, well, until 2035, there would still be cap allocation towards him. So another way of looking at things is like anything that's guaranteed. So that's like these bolded numbers, future guaranteed money. Like let's say if you get cut, that automatically accelerates. So when you're like, how much dead money is this guy to be to cut? It's always about like their future guaranteed money. That all comes due at once. So that was my Carter projection. Oh, let me stop sharing. Have you or Jimbo done a mock on the upcoming Nolan Smith contract? Okay. Yes, I have also done Nolan Smith. I'm not going to go back to Twitter for this. Off the top of my head, it was like low 20s. I thought it was like 22 million, maybe 4 years, 88 million. Probably like the first 2 years fully guaranteed, and then like some kind of partially early vesting guarantee if he's still on the roster, like the third day of that next year, something like that. That's also subject to change. Smith comes out, let's say he puts up 14 sacks, a forced fumble, like 45 tackles, like 65, 70 pressures. Now that money is going way up into Nick Bonito range, probably. All right. I got a comment about Ojomo. Next year, we lose Ojomo and maybe Reed Blankenship. I don't like typing it, but it'd have to be a team-friendly deal. So I did a contract projection for Blankenship. For whatever reason, some people think there's no way we bring him back. But I think the Eagles are like wanting to have a clear succession plan if they do decide to move on. I think there's this total myth in my mind being floated around, which is the Eagles go to the absolute bargain barrel or they pay top of market and they hate trying to hit doubles with those mid-tier contracts. I think that's baloney. You could argue Saquon Barkley was a mid-tier contract because it was. Honestly, as far as like 17 million, if you're looking at all defenders, that's 17 million per year. That's way down the list. And that's what they're paying for Zach Bond. Like, for the position, it's up there. Like, it's in that top 5 range. But for a defender, especially of his impact, well, you're saying, yeah, I understand Zach Bond's contract was top of market, but if you're just comparing it to all defenders, we are blessed. Vic Fangio's scheme doesn't support high sack. Yeah, that's funny. If your scheme is built in a way that kind of makes it less likely to get a lot of counting stats and you save yourself money that way, that's interesting. Has there ever been a time where a team has specifically like played a player less to not hit certain incentives? I think 100%. Even there are examples that I think are like publicly known about that. Would you ever do something like that with Ojomo? If let's say the Eagles are like, we would love to keep this guy long term, and they're like, all right, how can we sign this guy to like a 4-year contract? And you play him 700 something snaps, and he puts up crazy stats. Well, you're completely priced out of the market. But then you play him like 350 snaps because Davis can play a little bit, and Ty Robinson, you give him an extra 150 snaps that you would have gave to Ojomo, and now he has like 2.5 sacks, and you don't pay that much, but you use him in the playoffs a lot. Maybe that's an interesting strategy. Jarek says, if we somehow do not get a contract done on Blankenship during the year, I think the Eagles are going to let him go. Hate that. I don't know. It's hard to make declarative statements. I'm sure the same type of person would have said, Eagles are never going to pay top of market for a running back and a linebacker. Eagles are never going to draft a guy they didn't bring in on their 30 visit. Like, or somehow this complete myth that the Eagles like draft offensive linemen in the first round all the time, like, and they're investing all the time in their offensive line with premium assets. Like, in the last 11 years, it hasn't been that. Travis says, what is the % likelihood we pick up another edge? Do you feel like that's a must-have at this point? Yeah, I look at the roster and I think, would the Eagles even hesitate for 1 second to replace Okoronkwo? Like, to me, yes. Like, they would replace that spot in a second. In fact, their depth doesn't even make sense. They have 3 designated pass rushers. Not a single one of those guys can play a lick versus the run. And then they have a converted safety and a guy who's like 6'2", 230. And I understand Nolan Smith's unbelievable run defender for his size, but it's still his size. Like, he can still get torqued out of gaps. Like, he can still get displaced vertically. If you're trying to bring a guy over, he's going to destroy the pulling lineman, but like, that doesn't mean every part of his run game is elite. So potentially you have this like weakness out on the edge. The Falcons exploited it. Not a lot of other teams, like, they didn't face a lot of these under center wide zone teams where if you get beat at the point of attack, it's trouble. They kind of hardly faced many of those good under center run games at all the entire season. It would have been interesting. Like, what would have their defense looked like against Detroit? I think they would have struggled. So, I can never say. I could tell you this. Ed Kratz all but said they are scouring the market for an edge. Like, they are doing that. Is it lip service? Like, yeah, Howie's always scouring for everything all the time. I think it's more than that. I think it's like, specifically, this is the position they want, and they're willing to move draft picks to get that. But you'd like to do that earlier than later. And now we're getting, like, it is wild to trade, like, this Packers timing just 1 week before. But I guess if there is any player where it's just like, okay, you just go, like, we don't really even need to coach you that much. Just go get the quarterback. It's plug and play. More ready than Ty, arguably. I guess, is that referring to Gabe Hall? So Gabe Hall is an interesting player. 6'7", 295. But very, he's got a lot of shake and twitch to his game. So for like these lumbering guards who aren't that good laterally, he can beat them in a phone booth. I saw some good anchor versus like double teams, which for a second, admittedly, had me thinking, like, if he needed to come in a pinch as the backup nose, if something happened with Davis, could he do that? I said yes, but that, I mean, I don't know if we've seen guys of that build really do that before. Like, if he put on some pounds, like, and that was in that Calais Campbell type mold, maybe, but not to suggest he's ever going to be remotely close to Calais, who's still a tremendous player at this point. Ty Robinson and Ojomo are 4. Yeah, I don't expect Gabe Hall to play much. They switched to 5-man lines when facing wide zone looks, but there's a different. Okay, I mean, when teams ran 12 personnel and under center, did the Eagles play base fronts? Yes. They hardly faced that. And it's one thing to say they went to 5-man lines. It's another thing to say, like, even if there's a 5-man line, those edges are still getting blasted. And that's a problem. It would be, if you told me, like, they would have some fronts where they put a big guys out on the edge, I would be interested in that. So let's say you had Davis, Carter, Ojomo, and then you put Robinson and Hunt, or sorry, Smith and Robinson on the edge. That could be formidable. Comment from Matthew. I think they take edge or CB round 1 next spring. Yeah, I mean, defensive lineman seems highly likely, but I think we It's hard to say for sure one position. They've shown the willingness to take who they like best. But if it's like marginally different between, like, let's say there's an all-time tight end prospect or like a really good edge, really good CB, they probably lean towards the positional value the team need in that sense. So if I had to bet right now, I would say edge. But they could also, if they make a move for an edge, maybe that's out the window then. While we're waiting for more questions, I will take some of the questions from the mailbag. Are you concerned Sirianni will once again interfere with the offense like in 2023? This is tough because I've talked about this a lot and we don't truly know who's responsible for what. So there's speculation involved and you can only use deduction to try to figure out which plays came from where. Like, forget about trying to figure out who's coaching which players the most. Like, we're giving credit to Bobby King for linebackers, but maybe he's barely doing anything and it's all Vic Fangio. Or we're giving all the credit to Vic Fangio for the cornerback play. Maybe Christian Parker just is the best cornerback coach of all time. Not saying those things are likely, but it's possible. And in that sense, I'd be lying if I was like, okay, I know Sirianni interfered in the past and it led to negative results. And if he does it again in the future, I'll be able to identify that he did and that it didn't work. I totally reject that premise. But when his offenses haven't been insulated by some great talent level with minimal injuries and great coordinators, has it been great? Yes. And then when those things weren't in place, you had injuries, you had lesser talented roster, you had coordinators that weren't that good. Was he able to prop it up? Not really. And I say this about quarterbacks, I say this about coaches, it probably extrapolates to any position, which is people's impact doesn't scale linearly with who's around them. Some people, if they don't have a lot of talented people around them, they do nothing. Don't give you a pulse. But you surround them with a lot of good stuff, boom, they come in and it's multiplicative effect. Like, they supercharge everyone. And I think, like, when it comes to Hurts, when it comes to Sirianni, you could make that characterization about them. And then I'll give you the opposite example, Justin Herbert. He's had times where he's had bad coaches, bad injury luck, low deficit of talent, and he gave them a pulse because even for people who hate him, he has a rocket arm and is like deadly accurate and highly athletic. Even if he has like a good team around him, I don't necessarily like, he doesn't seem to possess the ability to just completely win a big game on his own. I think this is something that I will take criticism on, but like, I've seen lack of charisma, or it could be perceived as like not quite the same level of like leadership or competitive fire as other guys. And you cannot quantify it, but it's for anyone who's been on any type of team or competition, I think it's pretty obvious to know that does matter to some element. And I don't think he's going to take a good team and put them over the top. He's probably going to go down as one of these guys who made 1 million Pro Bowls, threw for 1 zillion yards, and never won the big one. And that's not an argument I typically would make. Like, normally I'd say like, oh yeah, like people are saying that about Peyton Manning his whole career until he won one. They're saying that about Hurts until he won one. And you could say that about every quarterback. But I'll just go ahead and say, like, I really doubt Herbert is going to win a Super Bowl. All right, got a few more comments. We know Patullo and Sirianni can communicate non-verbally really well. But this will be a new power dynamic to their friendship and right-hand man code up to this point. It will be. And to me, just reading between the lines, it's obvious how badly Patullo wanted to move up. And I don't think everyone has the same aspirations. Like, some people are happy to be the linebackers coach, but Patullo obviously has ambitions to move up and probably be a head coach too. I really don't. It's not like I'm saying anything groundbreaking with that. And it is a fact that he will have more power than he did before. But also the person who appointed him knows that. And you could say he knows, like Sirianni knows he will have more influence because he was just working many steps below Sirianni. Now he's getting promoted. So I do think it is an interesting power dynamic. Like, if someone told me Sirianni will have more power than he did with Kellen Moore, that would not surprise me. Do I think that would be a bad thing? I'm going to plead the fifth. Setting sarcasm aside, I think Sirianni is a lot better coach in general than he gets credit for, ironically, especially in Philly. Okay, so this is how I see it. I think it's very popular to say Sirianni is a great CEO head coach. He fosters a great culture, and then you hire some of these top-of-the-line coordinators, and it works seamlessly. And that's a winning formula, and I would not argue. But I think the coaching does get underappreciated at time, and it's not, I think, if it's like you're talking about tactics, like play design, game day, decision-making, I got to say, I don't think it's that strong. That's it. It could improve. I hope it does. In my humble opinion, that's a weakness. But in terms of like watching film of practice, going to a guy saying, this is the things you need to improve. This is how you have to improve it. And I'm going to follow up next week to make sure you've installed this plan to improve. And then we're going to look to see that it actually translate. And I'm going to hold you accountable the whole way. I'm going to be intense. I'm going to give people motivation, and like, you're on the field coaching. Yeah, I think there's more evidence than there was in the past that that's something he's really strong out. And you need like the Eagles media team to put stuff out for us to learn that. Otherwise, we're just guessing. Like, so yeah, when there's not information there, you would say like, okay, yeah, he is just a CEO head coach and there's not a lot else. But in terms of player development.
This episode is brought to you by Netflix. Becoming the most valuable sports franchise in the world doesn't happen without risk. A man who's willing to bet it all, and the players ready to make their own luck. America's Team, The Gambler and His Cowboys, is the story of the 1990s Dallas Cowboys and Jerry Jones's impact on NFL history. Featuring interviews with iconic 90s players and more. Watch America's Team, The Gambler and His Cowboys, streaming now only on Netflix.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Hey, it's Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. Now, I was looking for fun ways to tell you that Mint's offer of unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month is back. So I thought it would be fun if we made $15 bills. But it turns out that's very illegal. So there goes my big idea for the commercial. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
You're tuned into Auto Intelligence, live from Auto Trader, where data, tools, and your preferences sync to make your car shopping smooth.
They're searching inventory.
Oh, yeah.
They find what you need.
They're gonna find it.
You can make a budget for your wallet to help you succeed. Pricing's precise and true.
So true.
It's smarter car shopping.
Ooh.
Just for you.
Oh, it's just for you. Ooh. Find your next ride at autotrader.com. Powered by Auto Intelligence.
USAA knows dynamic duos can save the day, like superheroes and sidekicks, or auto and home insurance. With USAA, you can bundle your auto and home and save up to 10%. Visit USAA.com/bundle.
Bundle savings are off total premium, not available in all states or in all situations. To qualify, auto policy must be active prior to property policy issue, subject to change. Restrictions apply. Membership eligibility and product restrictions apply and are subject to change. USAA means United Services Automobile Association and its affiliates, San Antonio, Texas.
Maybe he's one of the upper echelon coaches, and that's a really important trait to have. So I'll give him tons of credit on that. And it's something probably like, if you asked me that a year ago, I probably would not give him as much credit in that department because there was less evidence. And then we can only speculate, and we're going to be wrong most of the time. But like, if you're taking the football, like offensive football acumen, play design, play sequencing, fine detail coaching, and you take Ben Johnson and Sirianni, it's a bloodbath. But like, maybe we'll see Ben Johnson doesn't have the charisma that Sirianni does. He doesn't foster the same level of culture where everyone cares about the guy next to him more than they do their own self. Will have veterans willingly tell everything they know to rookies, even if they might lose snaps to that guy, potentially lose money to that guy. They still are willing to do that. I think it's fair to give Sirianni credit for fostering a culture where you have players who are willing to do that. And I do think Ben Johnson will be a successful head coach. I do think Liam Cohen will be a successful head coach, but there's other elements there that definitely matter. I think Mike McDaniel is a great example where I think it's clear that his X's and O's acumen is up there with the top guys, but the culture is horrible. And it's hard in Miami. Sure, it starts with the GM, but he's not helping. Dan Campbell's style of high risk, high reward game management brings juice to it's interesting because when you look at all of this, like 2-point conversion aggressiveness, fourth down attempts aggressiveness, the numbers tend to be really close. Should I go for it? 52% projected win probability if I do, 48 if I don't. Based off some model that's making assumptions that aren't present in this game. Like, what are the wind conditions? What is the turf conditions? What is the temperature, the backdrop of the guy where he's kicking? A million things that make there's error in those win probability models. So if you're not talking like more than like, call it a 6-8% disparity where it's the decision is just so clear cut quantitatively, I do think there is this other element where it's like you're emboldening your players. And could that have a cumulative effect that makes them better players on the average play, but doesn't just show up in that singular event? I think there's merit to that. But I definitely look at Dan Campbell games, like specifically everyone remembers the notorious game where he was eschewing field goals, but he did kick a field goal at the end of the first half, but then in the second half had 2 opportunities and didn't do it. I thought some of those were bonehead decisions. There was a time where they went for the 2-point conversion from the 7-yard line, just out of hard-headedness. The numbers say that is absolutely lunacy. So it can hurt you. It's a double-edged sword, but I do think the cumulative effect of the aggressiveness outweighs these small differences in projected win probabilities based off one decision versus the other. So Ben Johnson's already not in love with his QB. I think he's just he doesn't want to look back at the end of the year and say, man, if only I had coached these guys harder, maybe we would have won, especially getting this 5-year record setting contract in Chicago. So I just think that's his coaching style. And he's known to be kind of tightly wound. And if you mess up, he's going to be aggravated. If you told me that negatively affects Caleb, and you have to understand that if you coach every player differently, and this is a new generation of quarterbacks that maybe they've already made a lot of money when they got to the league, and before you could like really beat down on a rookie and they would never say anything, but now they maybe feel more entitled and they're going to be like, who is this guy yelling? That I think that's totally plausible. Is that the case here? I have no idea. But I will say this, the Bears are, barring injury, 99.9% chance they will be better than they were last year. McDaniels is in the class of great X's and O's, but sucks at everything else. I think if you consider play sequencing X's and O's, yes, but I don't. And I think that's a meta skill that he has that's outside of X's and O's. But like you talk about like keeping players accountable, culture building, like literally showing high energy. I don't know, man. I think he's probably much better suited as like an offensive coordinator, offensive consultant than a head coach. That said, I do think it's better to try to hire offensive masterminds as head coaches than it is like these defensive culture builders. In the modern NFL, I don't think those guys are aging that well. Even some of the all-time great coaches that we've seen since like let's call it since 1998 up until like 2016, a million great defensive guys in there who had major success and won Super Bowls. Belichick, Tomlin, Bowles. But in the last 8 years, it's offense. So you look at a specific example, Aaron Glenn versus Ben Johnson. Many people consider Aaron Glenn a good, if not great, defensive coordinator. Same with Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson is much, much more likely to have success than Aaron Glenn. Now, people will say Jets needed a culture builder because it's been so bad, and I think that has merit. But what's the ceiling? Like, yeah, you make the culture better, but then, like, I still don't think Aaron Glenn has the juice to, like, propel a team to win the Super Bowl, just, like, calling man pressures and then hoping he has a mastermind offensive play caller versus Ben Johnson, who can do all that himself. Lots of mic'd up moments with Zach Bond and others saying Sirianni trusts us. That's why he's making this gutsy call. It's a mutual respect between the players and coaches, and having that allows players to play better than they would had they not had it. And the cumulative effect on that probably outweighs these infinitesimal percentage differences when you're going for it on your own 48. McDaniels is a great coach for 60 minutes a week. You know, I would beg to differ. I would say like from Monday, probably the entire during the season, I think he's a great coach. I think it's everything else. Like it's the team meetings, it's training camp, it's all that. That's where he really is not bringing what he needs to bring. But I hear what you're saying. Like, yeah, he doesn't have the other elements that matter outside of X's and O's. But I think there are guys that do have that. We saw it with McVay, Shanahan. Like, yeah, it's easy to crap on him because they had such a bad year, but he's obviously not only a great X's and O's guy, but he's a good teacher, good at play sequencing. I think he does a pretty good job of motivating the guys. They've had a lot of injury problems. Like, I don't necessarily know if they've had enough focus on like their defense. Like they were up there every year competing for Super Bowls when their defense was cooking. Then they're letting all pros like walk out the door. So, you know, it doesn't help when you have to pay Purdy whatever they're paying him. So yeah, I think they have other problems, but I still think he's one of the best coaches. Bowles is still successful. I have no idea whether Aaron Glenn will succeed in New York, but that's as much New York as it is his talent. Yeah, I mean, this goes back to what we were saying earlier, which is even after it transpires, we'll still never know where to attribute the credit. Like, it's funny, the exercise of trying to predict future games. There's this, insane $30 billion NFL betting market, but yet we can't even describe what happened in the past. We can't say, of this 100% pie for the Super Bowl winning Broncos, how responsible was Peyton Manning? What percent? How responsible was the coach? How responsible did they have, at that time, their edge rushers did they have Von Miller? We can't even solve that problem. So yeah, really, it's all anecdotal. They'll go out there and they'll play uninspired football, and then people say it's the coach. Maybe it's something else. Vrabel is still really good at getting everything out of a team that he can. Yeah. But I just think in general, this archetype is not the archetype I would go for if I was hiring a coach. Like, I just find it hard to believe that a Vrabel type coach gives you a better chance of winning the Super Bowl, all other factors being equal, to a guy like Liam Cohen or Ben Johnson. There's another thing, which is Vrabel. From what I know about him, he's such a headstrong type personality that would he relinquish control to one of the assistant coaches or coordinators, where had he done it, it would make them better. But no, I'm a specialist in linebackers, or I'm going to call the defensive play calls, or whatever it may be, or hire some offensive coordinator where he can convince the guy no, we gotta have to be a running team. That's how you win Super Bowls. I don't know that, but I know that's not the case for these young, innovative offensive guys, because tactically, I could imagine a world where you have a mediocre culture, but they're so advanced in the tactics that they win anyway. So I'm putting my eggs in that basket. The innovative offensive coordinator is definitely the better hire. You can make the argument that those guys actually hose the future of the team because they don't suck enough to get a top QB. Well, this is a total fallacy, right? Because look at all the top QBs in the NFL and what draft position were they selected. We're not talking about a bunch of number one picks. You can be middle of the pack and trade up trivially and potentially land a superstar quarterback. I think, is it true that if you have a culture builder, you probably have even higher floor, because even when they're knocked out of the playoffs, at no point are they ever thinking, maybe we could use the number one pick next year because a sick quarterback's coming out. No, they're thinking, I'm going to be fired or I'm going to be a laughingstock, and we're going to fight tooth and nail to win our last 3 or 4 running to make it look like we had a respectable record, even though we're one of the worst teams in the NFL. And now you don't get that premium pick. Whereas, you could envision a McDaniel last year, you could envision easily a season where you get a couple injuries, then you have a couple of people who are screw this nerd stuff, and that team implodes. I actually could see that floor being even lower. I'm laughing watching you measure McDaniel effect with your hands. Let me know what I was doing. I don't even know. Tomlin's got the Steelers in a purgatory of 7 to 10 wins. Exactly. I should have thought of this. Thank you, Travis. The ultimate culture builder, the ultimate guy who won't relinquish full control, the ultimate guy who wants job security, Mike Tomlin, and they're frozen in time. And this wasn't even my original argument. Oh, you don't want a culture builder because you'll be frozen and you don't have a high ceiling. That's completely tertiary point to what I'm really trying to say, which is, yes, there are successful seasons, but really the only measuring stick that I'm looking at is Super Bowl. Everything's in reference to that. When I make an acquisition, what does that do to my Super Bowl probability? Not my EPA, not my points differential, not my regular season win total, Super Bowl percent. So you look at a guy like Tanner McKee. Yes, a second rounder would be amazing compensation for a player like that. But in the event that Hurts goes out, your Super Bowl odds tank but they tank a lot less when you have Tanner McKee. So he raises your Super Bowl odds disproportionately to his talent level. And then you say, we have this treasure trove of picks. No, that's baked into the value. I'm not accepting anything less than a first rounder. And I think that's totally sound process because I'm thinking about everything in terms of Super Bowl odds. So, I mean, a great example, look at Packers. I think a lot of people go, Cowboys fleeced, terrible deal. And that's true. Had they done it in March, they would have got way more. So that process is terrible. But 2 first rounders and like a throw-in veteran interior pass rusher, that's pretty good. Like, it's not every day you're getting 2 first rounders. And yeah, they may be late picks, but like that's solid. Like that's still in a vacuum, solid compensation. If you view Micah Parsons as like one of the greatest edge to ever play the game and disrupt every single game, it seems like peanuts. It's a joke. And I understand that. But if you view him as someone who kind of freelances to just get around some guy in any way possible, leaving voids in the defense, getting completely thrown out of the club in run plays at times, not really pushing pockets and helping teammates get sacks, and really, really good at beating certain archetypes of tackles who are tall and slow-footed and don't have great hand placement, it's a different conversation. Does that put the Packers over the edge? I mean, like I said in the beginning of this episode, I wrote an article that said the Packers are a star edge rusher away from being right up in there with the contenders. And now it's materialized. The cornerbacks, that obviously looks like a position of weakness. Like if I was the Packers, I'm literally looking at my roster thinking I'm a cornerback away. I might be right up there. I might be a Super Bowl candidate. So that's where it changes things, because I don't think it matters that much that the Eagles don't have to play him twice. I think it matters that a contender got better. If you read Zach Berman's The Franchise, it will give you some insight into why they hired the Sirianni type. And if you want to give more information, Ryan, on that, if it's alluding to something about they want a coach that believes in the same type of organizational philosophies as they can do and kind of play the job of like puppet master, I'd just be interested to hear what is in there. It's not always like a bad thing. I think it's very easy to like have this vision of a person who is, just going to do everything that the GM and owner want them to do and think that's inherently a bad thing. I don't think it is. I think if as the GM and owner, if you act as this kernel where all of this information from scouts, coaches, players, wherever is getting siphoned in, and you're synthesizing all that information and you're able to distribute that back down, I think that can be highly successful. I think there's people who think, okay, they're meddling and they want them to play a certain type of football and that's bad. I don't think that's the case. I think they're able to get all this information and decide what strategically is the best path forward and enact that. And you need to have willing participants in that cycle. So I don't know if that's actually what this is referring to, but if it is, I think it's not as sinister as it may seem on the outside. I think it's just how you frame it. I think if you have someone who's willing to be this control arm to take the organizational philosophy and enact that with the players and the coordinators and everything like that, that could be great. I don't think you need the guy from like the Vince Lombardi where you literally do every single thing. Like you just have one guy who just runs the show and everyone has to like answer to them. I just don't see any reason why you would need that. Based on the available data, where would you put the Eagles in your preseason rankings? So if you're a member of the Patreon, there's an article where I put up my every single offense and defense ranked in tiers, and they're in the top tier. So for offense, I put them in above average, not elite. And for defense, I put them in elite. A good offense and a great defense, you're one of the best teams in the NFL. You're right in the mix. You're the Ravens, great offense, great defense. Bills, great offense, pretty good defense, but when you play the good teams, not as good. Chiefs, take your pick for the fifth team, but I think, there's a lot of candidates who could probably take that, but Packers may have just vaulted into that spot. Lions, it's going to be interesting. Like, they need another edge rusher. Are they going to sign Zadarius Smith? Like, this new offensive coordinator, is he able to just put the Ben Johnson playbook in and run it? Or is he going to do his own system? How is that transition going to be? So, like, to me, they're a team who has a wide range. Like, if you told me the Lions, had an injury, had some growing pains with their offensive coordinator and finished 10-7, that's within the range of possibility. I could also see them as going 15-2. If they stay healthy, it's the offensive talent and what they did last year, they're able to still run the show. You're talking about one of the best teams in the NFL. If not, you're talking about up there with the Ravens. It's not negative. It's based on a dedicated philosophy that coaches use. The thread that they believe links all-time great coaches. Okay. Well, it's nothing that I was talking about. Let me know what it is. But everyone knows his slogan is tough, detailed, together. Are these characteristics that tend to be traits of successful teams? There's no doubt. But those words obviously don't matter. It's literally what are the processes you have in place that ensure that your players are tough? Well, you draft and sign players that are tough. You coach them tough. Detailed. The coaches, what are the coaching points? How granular are those? How much feedback are you giving, whether they've succeeded on the feet coaching or not? What are they looking for when they watch film? The conversations they're having with the coaches and with their teammates. And together, to me, that's you're doing off the field events and you're building a bond where maybe you're willing to go that extra mile on a certain play, or you just know the guy next to you better than you would had you not had this camaraderie, and you can play off each other better. And we saw that, it was so stark last year when Avonte Maddox was in and he's going like this, trying to pass off routes to these young guys around him. No one has a clue and they're letting guys run free. And Maddox is the veteran. You're there's no way he's making the mistake when there's a rookie he's trying to pass him off to. But the communication line is broken. Then you bring in DeJean, all of a sudden, they're clicking. Bond, DeJean, Blankenship, Slay, Mitchell. It's a well-oiled machine. Communication unbelievable. The delivering guys to the zone over from them, amazing. This is a extremely impactful thing a characteristic to have in a defense. Reserve the right to adjust that offensive ranking higher or lower. Yeah, like I said, when you go about doing these things, you say, based on the available evidence, here's why I rank them the way I do. Maybe you think this piece of evidence means more than I do. Maybe you reject it and you don't think it's valid at all. And you try to do that for every team, and you know a lot more about certain situations than you do others. So ultimately, it's kind of an exercise in futility. But I think the real learnings is, what is the composition of these teams? What kind of systems do they run? How does the talent complement that system? Rather than just being I think the Ravens are 2 rankings better than the Bills. Like that just doesn't have much value. Sorry about this. I have a blinding light here. There actually is blinds. They just don't seem to work. That's marginally better. Sorry about that. All right. You can feel free to write in more questions. We'll probably do like 2 or 3 more. Okay, we've done this one. I don't know. I don't believe we did this one. What evolutions in coverage, usage, and blitzing rate could we see in year 2 of Vic Fangio? So here's the thing. When you have 2 really good outside corners, like they did with Slay and Mitchell, you can play a lot of coverages where they're essentially on an island. Unless the guy goes shallow and underneath, it's man coverage. We'll just call it that. Talking about quarters, obviously cover 1, and split field coverage. So the guy opposite the cover 2 side, that's going to be man coverage most of the time. They may not feel as confident in that. So immediately you start to think, okay, maybe they'll play more split field coverage where they give safety help to the CB2 in favor of, if maybe otherwise they would have been playing cover 4. And that there's times that could hurt you. How many times did Reed Blankenship take away a vertical type crosser from a player in a 3 receiver set to the opposite side? A lot. Probably 30. Well, if you have him just over Ja'Cory Bennett or Adoree Jackson, just playing over the top on them, well, now he can't cross key. So whose responsibility does that become? Either Zach Bond or Jihad Campbell. So they're fortunate enough that they have 2 linebackers who can run like the wind, and they're going to be able to match up against any tight end and some like moderate speed receivers. So they have a chance. I hope Bennett wins the job because I think he's better in man coverage, and that gives you more optionality in the back end when you can play what's essentially quasi man coverage. Whereas, in my opinion, Jackson, there's a high likelihood that he plays with a bigger cushion than we are comfortable with and surrenders too many quick underneath completions. And then you're giving teams opportunity to open up the playbook on second and short, second and medium. And the Eagles, man, did they do themselves a service last year? Repeatedly giving other teams in a bind where they were like in basically pass-only situations. And that makes it a lot easier to play defense. All right. Last question. We'll get out of here. Do you think this is the year the Ravens get over the hump? It seems like they constantly screw up high leverage situations in the playoffs. And just alluding back to what we've talked about this episode, trying to predict the future is a fool's errand. You could be right for every single week, the first 21 weeks, saying, oh yeah, I think the Ravens are the best team. They're going to win the Super Bowl. They go 20-0. And then they reach the Super Bowl and they flatline. So then is my prediction off? Or like, no, actually along the way, you were directionally correct the entire time. You're looking like a genius. And then somehow it's invalidated just at the last second because maybe their star quarterback gets injured and they lose the game. But let's just say all that stuff is removed and it's in a vacuum. Yeah, I think the Ravens are the best team in the NFL. And if there was no parity in football, I think they'd win the Super Bowl. So that's that. Stay tuned for our next episode of Eagles Edge, where we'll be doing a game preview for week 1. Stay tuned for my updated matchup sheet, which I'll be posting on Twitter, which will have a million stats you'd ever want to know about the game. Unfortunately, in week 1, we don't know how these teams are going to play. Over the season, this will become a much more valuable resource. But for this, it's using 2024 stats for now. And we'll see you then.